Hey everyone, it's Jinger. Living here in Los Angeles, I've finally found a sense of I've finally found a sense of peace I never thought possible away from the cameras and the rigid rules of the big house. But today, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. My heart is racing because something monumental just happened back home in Arkansas, something we've all prayed for, but many doubted would ever happen. My sister Jana, the one who spent her entire life raising everyone else, the sister who stayed behind when we all moved on, has finally, quietly, and secretly stepped into the most beautiful chapter of her life. The rumors are true. Jana is officially a mother, but the story behind this birth, the secret name she chose to honor a lost part of our past, and the way my father, Jim Bob, reacted behind closed doors, it's not what you've seen in the headlines. I've decided to break my silence, to tell you the real story, the one only a sister could know. From the hidden hospital room to the moment she held him for the first time, this is Jana's journey to motherhood, and it changes the Duggar legacy forever. Stick with me because this is going to be emotional. Though, for as long as I can remember, the big house in Arkansas was a place of constant noise. With 19 of us, the hallways were never quiet. But in the middle of all that chaos, there was one person who was always the anchor. My sister, Jana. While the rest of us were getting married, moving away, and starting our own lives, Jana stayed. I remember looking at her sometimes, seeing her in the garden or the kitchen, and wondering if she ever felt lonely. For years, the world labeled her the stay at home daughter. They made jokes, they speculated, and they put so much pressure on her to find the one. But Jana is a fortress. She carried the weight of our family's expectations on her shoulders without a single complaint. She spent her 20s raising our younger siblings, managing the household, and being the person everyone leaned on. I remember talking to her late at night, and she'd always say she was waiting for God's timing. But I could see it in her eyes, that quiet longing for something of her own. Something that wasn't a family project or someone else's child. The years turned into a decade. And then more. We all moved on. I moved to LA. Jill had her own journey. Jessa was busy with her growing family. And there was Jana, still in that same bedroom, still planting those same flowers. But what the world didn't see was the strength it took for her to wait. She wasn't stuck. She was preparing. She was becoming the woman who would eventually have the courage to choose a life that was truly hers. That long wait, it wasn't a tragedy. It was the foundation for the miracle that was about to happen. And today, when I think about where she is now, compared to those quiet years in the garden, I realize that the longest waits often lead to the most beautiful destinations. When Jana and Stephen Wissmann finally got married, the whole world exhaled a sigh of relief. But for Jana, that was just the beginning of her true private life. For the first time, she had a home that wasn't a television set. She had a husband who saw her for who she was, not just a character on a show. So when she found out she was pregnant, her first instinct wasn't to call a producer or post a photo. It was to protect it. I remember the day she told me. Her voice on the phone sounded different, lighter, but also guarded. She said, "Jinger, I'm finally going to be a mom." We both cried. But then the conversation turned serious. We talked about the cameras, the paparazzi, and the intense scrutiny our family faces every time a new baby arrives. Jana made a choice right then and there. This journey would be secret. For 9 months, she lived a double life. She wore baggy clothes in the few photos she shared. She avoided large family gatherings where cameras might be present. And she stayed tucked away in Nebraska. Even some of our own relatives didn't know the full extent of it. She wanted to experience the kicks, the morning sickness, and the quiet joy of a growing belly without the world's commentary. It was the first time a Duggar pregnancy wasn't a public event. And honestly, it was the most peaceful I had ever heard her. She was reclaiming her body and her story. She was no longer Jana from TV. She was just a woman deeply in love with a child she hadn't met yet, building a wall of privacy that even my father couldn't breach. It was her first act of true independence. And it was beautiful. The clock on my bedside table in Los Angeles read 1:45 a.m. when the silence was finally broken. It wasn't a loud alarm, but that specific sharp vibration of a phone that tells you something life-changing is happening. It was Stephen. His voice was low, steady, but I could hear the adrenaline underneath. He said, "Jinger, it's time. We're heading out. I want you to picture this a freezing, pitch black Nebraska night in January 2026. The wind is howling across the plains, and while the rest of the world is asleep, my sister Jana is navigating the most terrifying and beautiful moment of her life. They didn't call an ambulance. They didn't alert the local news. They quietly loaded a packed bag into their SUV and drove. Jana told me later that the heater in the car felt like it took forever to kick in, and she spent that 30-minute drive staring out the window at the empty cornfields, breathing through the waves of pain that were becoming more frequent. She was terrified not of the birth itself, but of being seen. You have to understand, for 20 years, Jana couldn't go to a grocery store without someone asking for a photo or a counting on secret. The idea of a paparazzi photographer standing outside a hospital room during her most vulnerable moment was her worst nightmare. So they bypassed the major medical centers in Lincoln and drove to a smaller, more discreet facility. When they arrived, the hospital was eerily quiet. Just the hum of the vending machines and the soft squeak of the nurse's shoes on the linoleum floor. Jana wore a heavy coat and a hat pulled low, walking slowly, leaning on Stephen's arm. She wasn't a Jana Duggar to the staff there. She was just a patient. And that, she told me, was the first moment she felt safe. The anonymity was a gift. As the sliding doors closed behind them, she felt like she was finally leaving the Duggar empire behind and entering a world where she was just a mother to be. They were checked into a room at the very end of the hall, a room with a view of the quiet horizon. No cameras, no producers, no fans, just the beginning of a new life. Once they were settled in the room, the reality of the situation began to set in. Labor is a marathon. And for Jana, it was a test of everything she had ever been taught about endurance. But the real drama wasn't just physical, it was digital. Even though she wanted a secret birth, the Duggar family tree has deep roots and news travels fast. By 4:00 a.m., the family group chat was exploding. My father, Jim Bob, has always viewed a new grandchild as a milestone for the family brand. I know that sounds harsh, but it's the reality we grew up in. Every birth was a production. He began texting Stephen, asking for updates, asking which hospital they were at, even suggesting that he might hop on a private flight to be there for the big reveal. Jana was in the middle of a heavy contraction when Stephen read her the message. She looked at him, sweat on her forehead, eyes filled with a new kind of fire, and she said, "No. Tell him. No. That might sound simple to you, but for a daughter who was raised in a culture of absolute obedience, saying to no to my father during a major life event was like a revolution. It was a battle of wills happening over encrypted messages while she was fighting through the pain. Stephen was her shield. He politely but firmly told my father that they were not sharing the location and that they would call once the baby was born. The tension was palpable. Jana spent those hours listening to a playlist of soft worship music, trying to block out the noise of her past. She told me she kept thinking about our births on TV, the bright lights, the crews in the room, the feeling of being watched. She made a vow in that labor room that her son would never feel that. Every time her phone buzzed with another family member asking for the scoop, she ignored it. She was reclaiming her labor. She was reclaiming her body. It wasn't about the Duggars. It was about the Wissmanns. And in that quiet, dimly lit room, Jana became a leader. She led her own life for the first time. Then came the moment that changed our family history forever. At exactly 6:14 a.m., as the first light of the Nebraska sun began to touch the snow outside, the room was filled with the most incredible sound, a loud, healthy, demanding first cry. Jana said that the moment they placed him on her chest, the last 10 years of waiting just vanished. All the questions from fans about why she wasn't married, all the pressure to be the perfect daughter, all the scandals that had rocked our family, it all became background noise. He was perfect. He had a full head of dark hair and the most tiny, delicate features. Stephen was moved to tears, holding Jana's hand, whispering that she had done it. There was no camera crew to capture the first look. There was no producer telling her to smile for the lens. It was raw, messy, and deeply holy. For the first hour, they didn't even call us. They just sat in that silence, bonding with their son. Jana told me she looked at his little hands and realized that this child was blank slate. He didn't owe anything to a TV network. He didn't have to uphold a modesty code for a brand. He was just a baby, and she was just his mom. The stay at home daughter, the one the world thought would never leave the big house, had just birthed the next generation of freedom. When she finally did FaceTime me, I saw a version of my sister I had never seen before. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were glowing with a fierce independence. She showed me his face, and for a moment, I couldn't even speak. I just cried. I cried for the years she waited, and I cried for the joy that she finally found. She whispered to me, "Jinger, he's safe. Nobody knows he's here yet." And in that moment, I knew the Duggar empire hadn't just fallen. It had been replaced by something much better real. Private, loving family. One of the biggest questions that had been swirling in the family group chat and across the internet for months was the name. In our family, names have always carried a lot of weight. We grew up with the letter J being a brand, a symbol of unity, but also a symbol of the show. So when Jana whispered the name to me over our private FaceTime call, I felt a shiver of pure joy. She didn't choose a J name. She didn't choose a name to please our father or to keep the Duggar tradition alive. Instead, she chose a name that was modern, strong, and carried a secret tribute. She named him after her twin brother, John David, but in a way that only those close to her would understand. She took the meaning of John, God is gracious, and combined it with a middle name that represented new beginnings. It was a masterclass in subtlety. By stepping away from the letter Jana, was quietly declaring her independence. She was saying that her son's identity wouldn't be tied to a TV show or a gimmick. He is his own person. I remember her telling me, Jinger, I want him to walk into a room and not have people immediately link to a brand. I want him to have his own name. This choice sent shockwaves through the big house. It was the first time an oldest daughter had broken the pattern so publicly. It wasn't just a name. It was a manifesto for his future freedom. Now, let's talk about the reaction back in Tontatown. My father, Jim Bob, has spent his entire life being the director of our family's story. He's used to being the first one to know, the one to hold the baby for the official photo, and the one to negotiate the media deals. But this time, he was a spectator. When he found out the birth had already happened and that he hadn't been invited to the hospital, it was a massive blow. Sources close to the family told me that the atmosphere in the big house was incredibly tense. There were no celebratory parties at first, just a lot of hushed conversations and phone calls. He felt sidelined, not just as a grandfather, but as the patriarch. For years, Jana was his right hand, the one who kept the house running and followed every rule. Seeing her build a wall that he couldn't climb over, it was a reality check he wasn't prepared for. He tried to suggest a public announcement or a family vlog to welcome the baby, but for the first time, his suggestions were met with a firm no from both Jana and Stephen. The power dynamic has shifted forever. The empire didn't crumble because of a scandal this time. It crumbled because of a daughter's boundaries. My mother's reaction was very different from my father's. When Jana finally sent her the first video of the baby, my mom was reportedly in tears for hours. But they weren't just tears of happiness. I think as a mother who had 19 children under the spotlight, seeing Jana hold her own baby in a quiet, private room triggered something deep inside her. Jana spent her entire youth being a sister mom. She gave up her teenage years and her 20s to help raise us. My mom knows that more than anyone, Seeing Jana finally have a child that was hers, not a sibling she was assigned to care for, but her own flesh and blood, brought up a lot of suppressed emotions. I sensed a quiet regret in my mom's voice when we spoke later. A regret that Jana had to wait so long, and a regret that so much of our family's joy was sold for public consumption. In that moment, Mom wasn't a TV personality. She was a grandmother mourning the lost years of her daughter while celebrating the new ones. It was a rare moment of raw, unscripted humanity in a family that has been scripted for far too long. Because of the distance and the secrecy, the first meeting between the siblings and the new baby happened on a massive, chaotic group FaceTime call. It was late at night for me in LA, early morning for others. One by one, the faces popped up on the screen. Jill, Jessa, Joy, even some of the brothers. When Jana turned the camera toward the sleeping baby, the silence was incredible. For a few minutes, nobody said a word. We all knew what this meant. We were looking at the first Duggar grandchild who was truly free. No cameras were in that room besides Jana's phone. We laughed about how much he looked like Steven, but had Jana's nose. We teased Jana about finally joining the moms club, but underneath the laughter, there was a deep sense of relief. We were all protective of her. We all made a silent pact on that call that we wouldn't let any details slip to the press. For that 1 hour, we weren't the Duggars from TV. We were just a group of siblings scattered across the country, united by the love for our sister who had finally found her piece of heaven. It was the most connected I've felt to my family in years. Jana has already made it clear that her son will be raised very differently from how we were. The old Duggar traditions, the ones that focused on outward appearance and rigid control, are being left behind in Arkansas. Jana is embracing a new way of life in Nebraska. She's focused on attachment parenting, where the baby's emotional needs come first, not a strict schedule. She's already told us that she won't be doing the blanket training or the extreme disciplinary measures that were part of our upbringing. She's reading books on child psychology and grace-based parenting. She wants her son to have a voice, to have choices, and to grow up in a home where love isn't conditional on performance. Even the way she's decorating his nursery, full of color, toys that spark imagination, and no modesty posters, is a sign of the times. She's creating a world for him that is filled with grace, not rules. She's not just raising a child, she's healing her own inner child through him. It's the ultimate act of breaking the cycle, and couldn't be more proud of her. And I couldn't be more proud of her. I want you to close your eyes and imagine a room that is the exact opposite of the big house dormitory we grew up in. In Arkansas, everything was communal, everything was functional, and let's be honest, it was a bit like a barracks. But Jana's home in Nebraska, that's where her heart has truly blossomed. For months before the baby arrived, Jana spent hours in what would become the nursery. She didn't just buy a crib and call it a day. She curated a sanctuary. I remember her showing me the room over FaceTime. The walls aren't that stark, cold white we were used to. She chose a soft, an earthy sage green, a color that feels like the gardens she used to tend to back home. There are no authority charts on the walls, no rigid schedules pinned to the door. Instead, there are hand-painted murals of trees and birds, things that celebrate God's creation in a way that feels gentle and free. She found this vintage solid oak rocking chair at an antique market, a chair with character and history. She told me she spent hours sitting in that chair before he was even born, just praying for him. Praying that he would grow up in a home where he was allowed to have his own thoughts, his own personality, and his own mistakes. The room is filled with soft textures, knitted blankets made by friends, books that encourage curiosity, and toys that aren't just for learning a trade, but for pure, simple play. It's a room built on love, not on a production schedule. When she brings him into that nursery, the air feels different. It feels light. There's a sense of privacy there that is almost holy. No cameras will ever film him sleeping in that crib. No producers will ever ask her to take a moment of him crying. It is a fortress of peace, and every single detail in that room is a testament to Jana's journey from a daughter of a public empire to the queen of her own private world. Now, we have to talk about something that many people don't realize is the true key to Jana's freedom, the money. In our family, financial control was one of the strongest tools of the empire. For years, the TLC contracts were managed by my father and for many of my siblings. That meant their livelihood depended on staying in his good graces and staying on the screen. But Jana did something very quiet and very smart over the last few years. She began to build her own independent life. Between her own business ventures, her savvy social media presence, and her partnership with Steven, who has a very successful and stable career, Jana reached a point where she didn't need the Duggar paycheck anymore. This is why she was able to say no to the birth special. This is why she could tell the magazines that her baby's first photos weren't for sale. You see, when you don't need their money, lose their power over you. I saw the shift in her confidence the moment she realized she was financially bulletproof. She wasn't just dar as asking for permission anymore. She was a woman with her own resources. She and Stephen bought their home with their own hard-earned money. They pay their own bills. They make their own investments. This financial independence is what allowed her to walk away from the cameras and never look back. It's a lesson she learned the hard way, watching others struggle to break free. She made sure that when her son was born, he wasn't born into a debt of gratitude to a TV network or a patriarch. He was born into a family that stands on its own 2 feet. And that, more than anything, is what makes this new era so permanent. The strings have been cut, and they can never be tied back. Even with all the walls Jana built, the world has a way of trying to claw its way in. About a week after the birth, we were hit with a wave of anxiety. A grainy photo taken from a distance showing Jana and Stephen leaving a doctor's office with a car seat surfaced on a tabloid site. It felt like a punch to the gut. Jana had worked so hard to keep this sacred, and yet there it was, the leak. The family group chat went into a tailspin. Everyone was asking who saw them. Was it a neighbor? Was it someone within our own circle? There's a specific kind of trauma that comes from being hunted by cameras, and I could feel Jana's heart breaking through the phone. For a moment, it felt like the old Duggar empire. Shadow was looming over her again, trying to claim her joy for clicks and views. But this is where the new Jana truly shined. In the past, there would have been a frantic PR statement or a staged official photo to try and regain control of the narrative. But Jana, she did nothing. She chose silence. She realized that by reacting, she would only give the tabloids what they wanted. She told me, Jinger, they can take a photo, but they can't take my piece. We spent hours talking about how to navigate this. We talked about the betrayal of privacy and how it feels to have your boundaries violated. But instead of letting it ruin her first weeks of motherhood, she used it as fuel to dig her heels in even deeper. She stayed home, she turned off her phone, and she focused on her son. It was a final, powerful lesson the world might watch, but they don't get to participate. The leak didn't break her. It only proved how much she had grown. She is no longer a victim of the spotlight. She is a mother who knows that her silence is her greatest strength. Before I close this chapter of the story, Jana asked me to share something directly with all of you who have followed her journey for nearly 2 decades. She knows that for many of you, she was a symbol of hope. The oldest daughter. You wanted to see find happiness. She wants you to know that she hears you and she feels your love. But she also wants you to understand why she's chosen the path of silence. Her message is simple. Wait for the life you actually want, not the one people expect you to have. For years, Jana felt the pressure of millions of eyes wondering when her life would start. She wants you to know that her life didn't start when she got married, and it didn't just start when she had a baby. It started the moment she decided her worth wasn't tied to a television show. She is happier today in a quiet house in Nebraska, changing diapers and gardening in total anonymity than she ever was on a red carpet. She wants to encourage every person who feels stuck or behind in life. She started this chapter at 34, and to her, it's the perfect time. She's not coming back to reality TV. She's not looking for a spin off. She is choosing a life of ordinary beauty. She told me to tell you that the greatest miracle isn't the birth itself, but the freedom to enjoy it in peace. She is finally, truly herself. And as her sister, watching her find that voice is the greatest gift I could ever receive. The Duggar legacy, as you knew it, is over. And honestly, that is the best news of all, because what's left is something real, something lasting, something quiet. As I sit here in my home, looking out at the California sun setting over the hills, I find myself reflecting on the incredible journey my sister Jana has just completed. For 20 years, the world watched her. They analyzed her every smile. They theorized about her private thoughts, and they labeled her in ways that she never asked for. For 2 decades, she was the face of a family empire that was built on the idea of a perfect, synchronized life. But today, as I think about her holding her son in that quiet, snowy room in Nebraska, I realize that the Duggar empire hasn't just fallen. It has been transformed into something unrecognizable to the cameras, but deeply familiar to the soul. Jana's son is the first of a new generation who will never know the weight of a production schedule. He won't grow up thinking that his value is tied to how many viewers tune in on Tuesday night. He won't have to learn how to perform happiness for a brand. He is the living, breathing evidence that my sister won the battle for her own life. People often ask me if the family is falling apart because the show ended or because the scandals broke our foundation. But standing where I am now, looking at Jana's courage, I see it differently. We aren't falling apart. We are finally coming together as individuals. The empire was a cage, even when it was a gilded one. And Jana, she was the one we thought would never leave, the one who would keep the lights on in the big house forever. Her departure, her secret marriage, and now her private motherhood. These are the final bricks falling from that old wall. What Jana has built in Nebraska isn't a new empire. It's a sanctuary. It's a place where grace isn't just a word we use in a sermon, but a reality we live every day. She has shown all of us, her siblings, her fans, and even her critics, that it is never too late to reclaim your narrative. You can be 34. You can be the obedient daughter for half your life, and you can still choose to walk through a new door. You can still choose to be free. I think about my father back in Arkansas, and I wonder if he realizes that his greatest legacy isn't the television show or the political influence he worked so hard to build. His greatest legacy is actually found in the moments he can't control, the moments where his children choose love and privacy over fame and rules. Jana is teaching us that the most powerful thing you can do with your life is to keep it for yourself. So, to my sister Jana, if you're listening, thank you. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for having the courage to be silent when the world wanted you to shout. And to all of you who have walked this long 20-year road with us, thank you for finally seeing the truth. The cameras are off. The lights have dimmed on the Duggar empire. And for the first time in our lives, the silence feels like home. My sister is a mother. Her son is free. And our story is finally our own. This isn't the end of a family. It's the beginning of a life. I'm Jinger, and I am so glad we could share this moment of truth together. Peace be with you, and goodbye.